Hi, I'm Tony Northrup, and for my Lightroom video training series, I'm going to go over a bunch of Lightroom tips and tricks. My other videos are very kind of structured, teaching you everything you need to know about Lightroom. This is very much freeform. I'm just going to go through the things that I think are coolest about Lightroom that you probably wouldn't have stumbled across yourself. Some of these are going to be really simple, some are going to be pretty complex, so you might have seen some of them, but you won't have seen all of them, I promise. Let's start with one of the simple ones. You can drag numbers in the develop module. Just instead of dragging the slider here, you can grab these numbers here and just slide it up or down. This works in Photoshop too. You generally can just drag a number with the mouse. That's it. This tip is a little more complex, but it can save you 15% of your disk space if you shoot RAW with no loss to image quality at all. This is a cool trick. So we'll jump back into Lightroom here and let me pull up my full collection of photographs. We're gonna create a new collection by importing it. But instead of doing this, we're gonna right click an existing collection and click Import Smart Collection Settings. If you don't yet have a collection, you'll need to create one for this, just for the sake of importing it. I'll click Import here. And this is gonna be weird. Rather than picking a file on your computer, we're gonna put in a web URL. It's sdp.io/findraw. Make sure you put that http:// first. This connects to my server. This is a file that I made for you and put on the web. It's a special collection that will find all your raw files. So click Open Now. So now you just need to click that new collection. You can see Lightroom called it Dumb Raw Files. And this will show you all the raw files that you have on your computer. This is just a computer that I use for recording these videos, so it doesn't have all of my pictures. But now you have all your raw files, no matter what type they are, no matter what type of camera you took with them. Now I'll hit Control A. What we're gonna do now is convert these raw files from their native formats into the DNG format. So if you haven't been using DNG, the DNG format losslessly compresses your picture, so it can really improve your disk space usage without reducing your quality at all. So with these selected, I'm gonna hit Shift F to pull up the menus here, and I'm gonna go to Library and then Convert Photos to DNG. Make sure that only Convert Raw Files is selected. That won't make any difference since we're only looking at raw files now. And then delete originals after successful conversion. I know it's a little bit scary, but it's gonna be okay. Lightroom's pretty good. You should always have a backup, of course, but it's gonna take your original raw file, convert it into the smaller DNG format without losing any image quality, and then just leave you with your DNGs when you're done. Make sure you don't select Use Lossy Compression, and don't select Embed Original Raw File, or you'll just be using up even more disk space. Go ahead and embed fast load data, and that will make the picture easier to load. And select the latest version of the compatibility for Camera Raw. Now click OK. So now you can see I have a bunch of CR2 files here. That's Canon's RAW format, and it's converting them to DNG for me, and it's going to churn through all of them. This saved me about 15% of the disk space that I was using, or about 150 gigs on my computer, which just means I can take that much more pictures without running out of disk space, right? So if you start to run out of disk space, it's a great thing to do. We'll let that run, and I'll go on to the next tip. For this next tip, direct adjustments. A couple of the panels in Lightroom allow for you to grab part of the picture and adjust it directly instead of moving little fiddly sliders and such, and it can really be much easier. So let's jump over into the develop module with one of our pictures. And one of the panels that allows for direct adjustments is the tone curve panel. You grab this little guy here. And so the tone curve, you could grab the midtones here and drag them down. Actually, that might be the darks. Or drag this or that. But let's say you know you want these whites to be a little brighter, but you're not sure if they're highlights or midtones. Just click that and grab it up. With this direct adjustment tool, you can interact directly with the picture rather than trying to figure out which part of the slider any part of your picture is. His mask could be a little darker, so I'm just going to grab that, make it a little darker. That's all there is to it. Now I'll show you how to hide a particular group of settings. So we'll jump into Lightroom once again, and I made some changes here. If I just want to hide them, click this little switch right here. That temporarily turns them off, so you can easily bring all the settings back. That's a great way to find out whether the changes you made in one specific panel actually improved your picture or not. I like to click back and forth between that. Now let's go on and I'll show you how to reset settings, which is a more permanent change. This isn't quite so easy to turn back, but in Lightroom, if you want to just reset any particular setting, you can double click. So I can just double click highlights here and it goes back. I can double click shadows here and it goes back. This works just about anywhere. There's no reason you would ever stumble across this. Double click exposure goes back, set that, and then double click the contrast and it goes back. Who would have known, right? Another way to reset settings is to hold down the Alt key on a Windows PC or the Option key on a Mac and watch for the various panels to change. So without the Alt key, you can see this says tone and presence. When I hold down the Alt key, reset tone, reset presence. Then I can just click that and it will change. Reset tone. So Lightroom always gives you some user interface hint when you hold down the Alt key. Now I'm holding it down, now I'm letting it go. You can see it's a little more obvious than just double clicking. You can also use the Alt or Option key when you're sliding some sliders to get some more information about how you're using it. So let's jump back into the Develop panel and I'll go up to the exposure slider here. And as I move the exposure down, you can see everything gets dark, everything gets bright when I move it to the right. Now I'll do that again with the Alt key or the Option key held down. Now when I slide it up, you can see, well, suddenly it's black, right? What it's showing me is everything that's being clipped, everything that would be cut off. So I'll drag it farther and farther to the right. And now just the areas that are being cut off, that are too bright, that are beyond white, are showing. So if I let go of the Alt key, you can see the whole picture. Now I'll press it again. And once again, we just see the parts that are being lost. You can also do that with the blacks. So we can drag the blacks down here. And now we can see if I drag the blacks way down, some of these blacks completely disappear. Like the mask of the bird here becomes total complete black. And you can tell when you hold down the Alt key, every part of the picture where you're losing detail. All the parts of the picture that are not black or that are not white right now have detail lost. When I drag the exposure up with the Alt key down, these are the parts you see now are the parts that are being clipped where you're losing detail. Just a quick way to make sure that no information is being lost in your picture, but that you're still maximizing the contrast. Let's go on and look at masking, which works pretty similarly. We'll jump down to the detail panel, and especially with a wildlife picture like this, you want to apply sharpening to the bird to make the eye look a little bit better. But if you apply that sharpening, the background gets all noisy. You can see just how noisy it is right now. You can use masking to make the sharpening apply only to the subject, to parts of your picture with a lot of detail. So if I drag the masking slider up here, you have no idea how much masking to put in, right? Hold down the Alt key. When you hold down the Alt key like I am now, Lightroom will start to show you the areas of detail in your picture that are currently having sharpening applied to them. So I kind of want to slide this around so that as much of the background as possible is not sharpened, but as much of the bird is sharpened as possible. So here you see a lot of the background is still showing up white. So holding down the Alt key or the Option key, sliding it to the right until the background is all nice and black. There we go. So now when I crank up that sharpening, it's going to apply just to the parts of the picture that have detail in them, like the bird's face, and not to the background at all. It's the only way to use the sharpening tool. Unfortunately, I made it just really difficult to find, right? If you use collections. At some point, you might have too many collections. I know I have more than 100 collections on my main computer, and so it can be hard just to find your collections. If you find a picture that you know is in one of the collections, you can quickly jump to the collections that contain that picture. So all you need to do is to, in the library view, just right-click a picture, select Go to Collection, and then select the collection containing it. Here's another way to quickly find your favorite collections, and it's using the film strip and right-clicking in an area where there's no markings whatsoever. I don't know why Adobe designs their user interfaces like this, but sometimes there are nice little Easter eggs that you can find. So I'm going to open up the film strip at the bottom here, and then just right-click the empty spot here. You can see, I'll select the Studio collection here. I'll right-click it, and then I'm going to select Add to Favorites. So now anytime I right-click this, you can see recent sources that allow me to quickly jump to any of the collections that I've used recently, and then the favorite sources. And these are ones that I've specifically marked as favorites. So I can quickly jump back to Studio or jump back to one of my other favorites. Again, you're just right-clicking the empty spot on the film strip toolbar there. We never have monitors that are big enough, right? You always wish you had a little more space to look at your pictures or look at a few more thumbnails. Well, here's a cheaper thing to do than just buying a bigger monitor, and it's different ways to maximize your screen space. So you can see now, especially I'll hit Shift F a couple of times, and now I just have so much cluttering my screen that are not my pictures. The quickest thing you can do is, if you just want to see a picture full screen, just hit the F key. Bam. It goes full screen. You can zoom in or out. If you just want to view a single picture with no distractions, just press F. If you're viewing the grid like this or some other module and you want to eliminate as many distractions as possible, first I like to hit Shift F to turn off the title bar and Shift F again to turn off the menu bar. So now my screen is filled with just Lightroom. Now I can get rid of some of these sidebars, the panels, by hitting the Tab key. Tab will just turn these off. To get rid of the top and bottom panels, hit Shift Tab. And now those disappear. Now my screen is mostly filled with just the grid. Of course, you can go through and click these little triangles there if you prefer to work with the mouse, but it's also really nice to have those keyboard shortcuts at the ready. So once again, it's F to go full screen, Shift F to get rid of the menu bars, Tab to get rid of the side panels, or Shift Tab to get rid of the top and bottom panels. Now let's talk about how to match total exposures. This isn't something that I have ever really needed to use, but I think it's a cool trick. If you take a sequence of pictures and your camera's auto exposure system varied a little bit, sometimes especially with weddings. Weddings are filled with people wearing black tuxedos and white dresses, and the camera's meeting system will look at the white dress and exposure picture darker, or look at a black tuxedo and exposure picture lighter. And then you're looking at a sequence of 10 pictures that you're trying to match up and their exposures are all different because of this. Lightroom can detect this and fix it for you. It's not something you use every day. So let's go into Lightroom and I'll see if I can find a sequence of pictures. So here we can see a series of pictures of this house sparrow, and they are taken at different exposures. You can see the metadata here reveals that this last picture is taken at 1/90th and f/5.6. This picture here is taken at 1/60th and f/5.6. And sure enough, just look at the thumbnail. As you can see, it's what, half a stop brighter. With the pictures that I want to match selected, I'm going to switch over to the Develop module. And then from the Settings menu, I'm going to select Match Total Exposures. And if you saw down the film strip here, some of those exposures changed. So before, these exposures varied a little bit, but now Lightroom has matched them all up to the primary picture that I had selected. You can see while I have 5 pictures here selected, there's always one that's a little bit brighter. That's your primary picture, and Lightroom's going to match the exposure to that picture. You can also use the Sync button after you made the change to adjust the exposure of all of the pictures together, knowing that they'll stay in sync now. Here's another way to see the parts of your picture that you're clipping, the shadows, the highlights that are either completely black or blown out. Jump in here, and when you're in the Develop module, not the Library module for some reason, you'll see Lightroom gives you these little triangles in the upper left and upper right corners. And just to show you, the shadow clipping is now turned on. When I turn it off, you can see, watch this area right here. I'll turn it on. You can see they appear blue. Make it a little more obvious by dropping the total exposure of the picture quite a bit. Now we're going to have plenty of blacks in there, and you can see more and more of the blacks are being completely lost as I go down farther and farther. Now the opposite end of this, showing parts of the picture that are overexposed, is the little triangle in the upper right here. So let's drag the exposure way up, and when you're overexposed, they appear white. So you can see now all the parts of the picture that are completely white are now showing up as red. Just an easy way to see the parts of the picture where you're losing detail. It's not necessarily a bad thing. I always like to see that I have a few highlights clipped and a few shadows clipped. That makes sure I have plenty of contrast in the picture. Another way you can work with the histogram is to drag it directly. And again, this only works in the Develop module for some reason, but clearly I've overexposed this picture, right? I can adjust the exposure by dragging the middle of the histogram here and just dragging it back to the left. Now, as you hover over it, you'll see that one of these sliders down here is going to highlight. So in the middle, you can see the exposure slider is highlighted. As I go a little bit to the left, it highlights the shadows. If I go all the way to the left, it highlights the blacks. Towards the right, we can highlight the highlights or the whites. So whichever one of these I drag is the slider that I'm going to be adjusting. It's exactly the same as adjusting the individual sliders, just a more visual way to do it. Did you know that you can drag pictures directly into Lightroom? Sometimes you have a picture on your computer that you want to pull into the Lightroom library. You could do File, Import, and then browse for the picture. Here's an easy way to do it. just open up Explorer on a PC or Finder on a Mac, and I'll pull Lightroom into the background here, get it into the library module. So I have Explorer in the front, Lightroom in the back. Now these pictures from Istanbul, I can just drag right in here. What's going to happen is Lightroom just opens up the import dialog for you at the right location. So all I have to do now is click import. Easy, right? Here's another really easy tip. Hold the spacebar down to pan around your pictures. So jumping into Lightroom. So here we are looking at some delightful treats in Turkey. And I'll zoom all the way in, and you can see I can use my hand to just drag the whole picture around. That's a really easy way to browse through the picture. But let's say I'm removing spots in the picture. Now I want to be able to drag, but I can't, right? Because instead I'm controlling the spot thing. Hold down the space bar and it turns your cursor back into a hand, whatever it is you're doing. So now you can pan around the picture, fix another spot, pan, fix, pan, fix. Now let's talk about changing your default preset. When you import pictures, Lightroom can automatically apply a bunch of settings to it, and I mostly just use camera corrections, but some people like to adjust the colors or the saturation to meet their own needs. It's really easy to set this up, so we'll jump into Lightroom, and we'll just pick a picture, and then make whatever settings you want to apply to all your pictures to this one picture. So for me, I know I want to go into the lens corrections and enable profile corrections and enable chromatic aberrations. And let's just, for the sake of example, say you also want to just reduce the sharpness or just reduce the saturation just a hair. Maybe you just think these colors are a little too rich. Now hold down the Alt key. You can see I'm holding it down, and click Set Default. Your reset button here turns into Set Default. Now all you have to do is to click Update to Current Settings. It's only going to apply this to settings taken with that particular type of camera. So these are more camera specific settings. But if you only use one camera, then that'll basically be all of your pictures. Now any pictures that I import from that particular camera will have those settings applied automatically. You want to know how to torture a camera nerd? Give them a new camera, but don't let them look at the raw files. And that's what Lightroom does, believe it or not, because Lightroom has to update Lightroom to a whole new version to handle any new camera. So every time there's a new camera, you have to wait for the next release of Lightroom to dig into your raw files. It's torturous. Anyway, a solution that Adobe has is Adobe Camera Raw. You can download this free tool, and it will translate your camera's pictures into DNG files, which Lightroom really can read. And it's not the best tool. It takes a little extra time because you have to process all of your pictures twice. You have to run and copy them to your computer manually, and then use the Camera Raw tool to translate them into DNG files, and then you can import those DNG files into Lightroom. But it's free. The update usually comes out much sooner than the update to Lightroom, and all said and done, it works okay. You can get Adobe Camera Raw directly from Adobe. Just go to sdp.io/Camera Raw. That's a shortcut, or you can just search for it. They have versions for both Windows and Mac. So now let's talk about how to get that JPEG look from your camera. Now we talk a lot about JPEG versus RAW, and RAW is pretty much always better. But there are cases where our cameras are processing the JPEG file in a way that we really like. Sometimes when you switch from JPEG to RAW, you think, why are my colors so bad? Why aren't I seeing the same colors that I did? I just want the colors to go back. And unfortunately, a lot of people will actually go back to shooting JPEGs just because they don't know how to reproduce the look. Of course, you could reproduce any look with just changing various sliders in Lightroom, adjusting the colors and the saturations, but there might be an easier way too. Kind of depends on your camera. Lightroom has a lot of profiles built in for specific camera models that will reproduce that JPEG look pretty perfectly. So in the Develop module here, we'll scroll down to Camera Calibration, and we'll click the Profile list. And you can see for this camera, Canon 5D Mark III, it uses Adobe Standard by default, which pretty much means the picture is going to look the same no matter which camera you use. It tries to process it to their kind of neutral baseline. But the 5D Mark III has a bunch of profiles built in, and if I was accustomed to these in the JPEG world, I could scroll down to one of these and get a very similar look. So if I wanted to process this like a portrait, I would just select that, and you can see that it really did change the colors. This is the 5D Mark III's standard processing versus the Adobe standard processing. You can see they are very different. Just look at how much the histogram changes. You don't have to use that. But if you liked the in-camera JPEG processing looks, check those out, and they might be a little more like what you're looking for. I hope you enjoyed these tips, but you can't learn a skill like photography or post-processing by just studying a bunch of tips. Instead, you should dig into my Adobe Lightroom 5 video book. It's only $9.99 for the ebook version that includes 12 hours of video. So you could read it as a book, you could watch it 12 hours of video, or you could do both. So if you're a book person, there's a book. If you're a video person, there's video. And you don't have to go searching through YouTube, picking up this bad video and this mediocre video. You just kind of learn spots of skills when you do that, and you don't actually learn the proper trade like post-processing. I promise it'll save you time and money. If you feel like you want the paperback book, you can get that for less than $20. And if you want, you can even get a DVD-ROM so that you can view all the videos offline in case you don't have enough bandwidth. So we have prices for everyone, and you'll help support us. So check that out at sdp.io/LR, or just check it out on Amazon. Thanks so much. If you have any questions, write a comment down below.